What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today we're taking a look at some Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX decks and some Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX decks from Japan, courtesy of hoonews.com, where they post lists that have placed well in Japanese tournaments. Now, let's take this with a grain of salt. We don't know how many players or how serious these tournaments were, but it's really neat to see some lists ahead of time that players in Japan are making out of these new cards that we'll be getting in the Chilling Reign set here in North America in June. So before we get into this and look at the cards and the decks, shout out to potownstore.com, the best place for you to get ptcgo codes, and be sure to use code Celio for 5% off. Also, subscribe to this channel for daily Pokemon TCG content. So before we look at the decks, let's just review what these cards do. So Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX, which is a Psychic type VMAX with 320 HP, weak to dark, resistant to fighting, has an ability and an attack. The ability reads: once during your turn, you may attach a Psychic energy from your hand to one of your benched Psychic Pokemon, then draw 2 cards. So do note that it has to go to the bench, and it has to be a Psychic Pokemon. And then you get to draw 2 cards, which is really great. Energy acceleration and draw all in one. We've seen this on Zacian V, and we know it makes for a busted card. Then the attack is Max Geist for 3 colorless energy, which will typically be paid with all Psychic in a Shadow Rider deck. Does 10 plus 30 more for each Psychic energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So if you get up like maybe 7 energy attached, you'll be swinging 220, which is a pretty decent amount for VMAXs to deal. Then we've got Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX, 320 HP, water type. This one has 2 attacks, weak to metal, and resistant to nothing. So the first attack, Emperor's Ride, for colorless. Colorless does 10 plus 30 more for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So if they have a full bench, it does 160. And if they're an Eternatus player with a full bench, then it does 250. And then the second attack, Max Lance, for water. It does 10. And then you can discard up to 2 energy from this Pokemon, which causes it to do 120 more damage for each energy discarded this way. So if you discard 2 water energy or 2 of any energy from this Pokemon, you'll do 250 for 2 energy, which is a nice chunk of damage. And we'll come back to this page to look at any other cards we need to that are new. This is pokeguardian.com, which is a nice place to look at the translations for the new sets. So here we'll look at a Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX. We'll look at 2 Shadow Rider lists and then 2 Ice Rider lists. So this first one is running a 4/4 line of Shadow Rider Calyrex. The one is just a different art, so it's over there. So Shadow Rider Calyrex is both the energy acceleration engine and part of the draw engine, so it's important to have a full line of this for consistency purposes. And from there, this deck kind of plays like a simplified Psychic Mewtwo build, where it just focuses mostly on the early Horror House, then into Poltergeist or Night Watch. You can Night Watch turn 2 because of Shadow Rider Calyrex's energy acceleration, and so it plays 4 Marnie to just try to get that Marnie plus Path to the Peak plus Night Watch going. So Path to the Peak is a new stadium card, which is pretty simple and very, very strong. Both players' Pokemon in play with a rule box have no abilities. So you can Path to the Peak after you've already used your own Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX's ability enough times. So you've drawn the cards you need, you've accelerated the energy you needed to, and then you play down Path to the Peak, Marnie your opponent, use Night Watch, shuffle 2 cards from their hand into their deck, do 150 damage. And I really love that. So it reminds me of Zoroark Garbodor a lot, actually, because Zoroark Garbodor would draw cards with trade until it was ready to go, then activate Garbatoxin to shut off everybody's abilities, and then just beat down the opponent. So it does kind of function like that. So I really do like this. It's simple yet very, very powerful. But do note that this won't be a strategy that's around for a long time, because Trevenant Dusknoir Tag Team and Gengar Mimikyu Tag Team will be rotating in September. A couple other new cards here. We've got the Galarian Zapdos V, which does a nice chunk of damage for just 1 fighting energy if your opponent has at least 3 V Pokemon in play. So this can one-shot Eternus VMAX, pikarom, Raichu, anything fighting weak, for just a single Aurora energy if they have enough V Pokemon in play. And then the new psychic item here, I honestly forget what it's called, but it allows you to search for either a basic psychic Pokemon or a basic psychic energy. So it's a really nice consistency item for psychic Pokemon. Next, we've got another Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX list, which is pretty similar, except this one is playing just one Trevenant Dusknoir, one Gengar Mimikyu, and then also a Mewtwo and Mew tag team. So it's not playing any Path to the Peak. Instead, this one's playing Chaotic Swell and the Mewtwo and Mew tag team. Note that you can use Perfection, not Perfection, Perfection is the ability, Miraculous Duo GX on Mewtwo and Mew to fully heal your board pretty easily in this deck because of the energy acceleration that Shadow Rider Calyrex has to offer, where Miraculous Duo isn't typically seen too often in the current standard format. For the short time that it gets to play with Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX, Miraculous Duo might be a GX attack that we see used more frequently. Also pretty cool to see they're playing two of the Reset Hole Marshadow just to make sure you're bumping any Path to the Peaks, because this deck does not want to see Path to the Peak come into play, whereas this deck actually seems like a counter to this kind of build. So that's pretty cool that these Shadow Rider Calyrex decks are so similar, yet also one is countering the other. Onto the Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX. Now let's remember the Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX is swinging for a max of 160 for the 2 colorless attack, or a max of 250 for the 2 water attack and discard 2 water energy. I have a soft spot for this build because it's running an Inteleon engine and I love the Inteleon cards. So the Drizzle, when you evolve it, you get to search for any trainer card, and when you and they have 2 different Inteleon, so there's 2 of the Inteleon that when you evolve it you get to search your deck for any 2 trainers, and then there's 2 of the Inteleon that once a turn you can put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So you've got a little bit of extra damage with these 2 Inteleon, and then with these 2 Inteleon you have some extra trainer search. And so the Drizzle being the middle guy for both of those Inteleons means you can just, like, you know, bench 2 Sobble, maybe even 3 Sobble early game, and then whenever you draw into a Drizzle, that just gets you any trainer card you want. Another new card that we should look at real quick is Melanie, which this deck is playing 3 of, I believe. Yeah, so this is playing 3 Melanie. Melanie is a new supporter card. Attach a water energy from your discard pile to one of your V Pokemon, then draw 3 cards. So this can attach a water energy to a V Pokemon that's on the bench or in the active, and this does include VMAX. So you could just chain Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX's strong attack that discards 2 energy to do 250, and you could attach Melanie, do it all over again. So Melanie seems very strong. This deck is playing 3 Path to the Peak, and it's playing 0 Rulebox Pokemon with abilities. It also has 2 of the Articuno with the Veil ability that reads when it's in the active spot, your opponent can't affect your water Pokemon on the bench with supporter cards. So your opponent can't boss's orders up the Calyrex VMAX or the Calyrex V that you're building up on the bench when this Articuno is in the active. And no other new cards here. So we got the Calyrex VMAX line, the new Inteleon, and the Path to the Peak. Oh, and Melanie, of course. And then here is the last list we'll look at, another Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX list, also playing Path to the Peak, but instead of the Inteleon line, this is playing a 4-3 line of Cinccino, which has the Make Do ability, discard a card, draw 2. So it has a very similar draw power as the Shadow Rider Calyrex deck will have if you set up Cinccinos in comparison to their Shadow Rider Calyrexes, but your Cinccino will still be usable while Path to the Peak is in play because it is not a rule box Pokemon, which is pretty important. This list is also playing 3 Melanie, and nothing else notable. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video looking over Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX and Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX deck lists. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this looking over Japanese lists and kind of now analyzing and picking them apart to see what they're doing and how they're different from each other. So like I said, hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a like and a comment if you did enjoy the video. It's the easiest way to support the channel for free and help other viewers see this video. Subscribe to the channel for daily Pokemon TCG content. Check out PotownStore.com for all of your ptcgo needs, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.